Cooper here, and welcome to our very first ever Facebook Live tour of the Legislature building. I'm so glad that you could join me, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a student. I hope that there was some of you that maybe were skeptical at the Legislature, but now because of the pandemic, you're unable to make it. So and try to show you some of the neat things in and around the building. It's a little bit windy today, so we won't spend too much time outside prior to moving inside, but wanted to talk a little bit about the exterior of the building, and then we'll head inside and see a couple of neat things, and then let you know what we're going to do next week. So great to have you with us. If you want to ask a question, feel free to put it in the comment section. We might need to answer those towards the end, which I think will be about 15 minutes or so, but go and I'll try to answer it for you. So, most of you will know Alberta became a province on September 1st, 1905, and building, but the premier of the day started to look around and see places where we could make a bit of a statement, and so wanted to have right on the edge of the river, and we could say we are here, we are a province, and we will be one of prominence. And so that it is two-toned. The upper sandstone, that's the brown of that sandstone actually came from southern Alberta in the Glenbow Quarry, which is just outside of Cochrane. And then the gray portion below is actually a granite that would have been imported from Inlet, BC. So the capital region and then utilized for the building. So interestingly enough, we'll head over to the building. The province first became a province in 1905, as I mentioned, and it was March 15th, 1906, that the very first sitting of the Legislature actually took place. And it took place not that far from here in the Thistle Rink. And the Thistle Rink was actually the largest building. Thought that about came to the Thistle Rink to that very first sitting of the Legislature. Now that legislature took place, there was 25 members, and like I say, it took place in a hockey rink where the then Edmonton Eskimos played. Between 1906 and 2000, the legislature then met at the McKay, and that again wasn't too far from here. And then shortly thereafter, the Terrace building was built, and then the members of the legislature met there all the way up until 1913, when they first met here. So the building itself began construction in 1906, and the then premier purchased 20 acres of land, or the government purchased 20 acres of land from the Hudson Bay Company, right here on the north bank of the Saskatchewan River, for $4,000 an acre, and they purchased 20 acres at that time. And so the dream of having our own legislature was born. The discussions were that the building would cost $1.25 million. And you can imagine that was a significant amount of money. But because of delays in construction and getting materials here and a number of other reasons, the final cost, they're not 100% sure of. Certainly it was north of $2 million, and some believe that it was upwards of $4 million. But that $4 million total would have included, just beyond my shoulder here behind the building in Edmonton, is the high-level bridge, and that bridge was also built around the same time. And so it's thought that the total $4 million would have been included with the cost of that. Also, Government House, which is about 10 blocks from here, was all built in and around that same time. So let's head inside and we'll check out some of the cool stuff in the rotunda and some of the other things, locations here. So this is the main door to the Legislature building, and these particular hand-carved oak doors were actually shipped from England here to the Legislature and still remain in place today. So we're just in the main entrance, and I wanted to give you a few sort of tidbits or interesting pieces of information about the actual building. But before we do that, I thought I'd show you something that's pretty unique, particularly different than around most other legislatures. And in October of 1988, October 14th actually, 1988, there was a gentleman who was very, very unpleased with the provincial government of the day, and he actually arrived at the Legislature building with a firearm, and at that time chased either a member of cabinet or security member into this elevator and discharged that firearm, and you can still see today the remnants of the bullet that was discharged here in 1988, the same elevator door that was there in 1988 that actually provided a cocoon of safety for the individual who got in that. Fortunately, the gunman was apprehended and no one was seriously injured, but it is a very unique feature of our building. Let's head back here into the main entryway. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the milestones of the building. From the exterior of that. Legislature grounds. In 1923, on the south lawn of the Legislature, they actually installed a bowling green for lawn bowling, and that lawn bowling green is still there today. It's still ran by the Edmonton Lawn Bowls Club. If you're ever in Edmonton and you wanted to go lawn bowling, I know that they do have some time available for the public. In 1940, the Edmonton Municipal Airport was just a few blocks away from here, and the building in its size provided some concerns to passing aircraft. And so in 1940, a red aircraft warning light was first installed on the roof of the building. In 1959, the band shell, so again on the south lawn of the Legislature is a band shell where concerts or activities take place predominantly during the summer. That was built in 1959. In 1966, the carillon, which is a musical instrument that is used to essentially ring what were bells on top of the dome, was installed. And still today you can hear, although we have an electronic carillon system here, but that was installed in 1966. And in 1967, the Centennial Flame, a flame that was installed to commemorate 100 years of Canada, was installed on the south lawn as well. And now the last thing that I wanted to show you, it's really neat, and it's right here in the foyer, and it was in 2005 to commemorate the 100th year anniversary of Alberta as a province, and Queen Elizabeth II visited and unveiled these wonderful pieces of stained glass above us. They include a number of the provincial symbols. You can see the wild rose there. You can see Her Honor's royal crest. You can also see the crest of the provincial legislature of our province. It says Forte Libre. It is our provincial motto. It stands for strong and free. And I just can't think of a better motto to describe the people of Alberta as strong and free. Let's head into the rotunda. I'll tell you a little bit about it, and then we can have a chance to take a couple of questions if you have any. So welcome to the Legislature Rotunda, and as you can see, it is wide and vast and filled predominantly of marble. And when this building was built in 1906, between 1906 and 1911, you can imagine the logistics that would have taken to import all of this marble. Alberta doesn't have a natural marble quarry, and so most of this particular marble was imported from different parts of North America. Predominantly, the marble here, most of the gray marble is from Philipsburg, Quebec. And then there's a number of other places around and where it was actually imported from eastern Pennsylvania. But these columns are approximately 16 metric tons of marble. And so what an amazing feat that it would have been to get these all the way from Quebec and then have them installed here in the Legislative Rotunda. In fact, artisans or artists from Italy were brought to Alberta to help with the installation and the design work that took place here. Interestingly enough, the designer is actually an American, the designer of the entire building. His name is Alan Jeffries. He was a 32-year-old American who in 1907, September of 1907, actually became the provincial architect. And he was responsible for the design of most of the exterior of the building. And then in 1911, another architect who was actually from England, his last name is Blakey, he was the provincial architect from 1911 to 1924, and he took care of much of the interior of the building. So he actually was responsible for the dome within the dome. So if we pan all the way up, you can see that there is the initial dome, and then you can see the palms. Those are actual palm trees at the top of the dome, and in a later tour, I'm going to actually take you all the way into the palm room so you can be up at the palm room. So the second designer was actually the one that was responsible for the dome within the dome. Interesting things about the size of the building. The plot of ground that this building takes up is 127 feet wide by 178 feet long. From the ground level to the top of the top of the bell tower is approximately 188 feet, and from here where we are in the rotunda to the top of the dome is 105 feet. So it's quite a distance all the way up to the top of the dome. We're also standing here in front of the legislative fountain, or the fountain here in the rotunda. And this fountain, interestingly enough, has two different incarnations. In 1939, there was no fountain here, but it was installed for King George's visit. And then it was quickly removed after his visit. But in 1959, Queen Elizabeth II, long may she reign, toured the Alberta Legislature for her very first official visit, and so this fountain was installed to commemorate that very particular day. I'd just like to mention a couple of other quick things here inside the rotunda, and maybe we'll have a more thorough tour of just the rotunda, but you can see there are a number of walls of honor where we pay tribute and remember those who have served in our armed forces, who really were responsible for laying in the foundation to protect our democracy and our freedoms. And that's what this building is all about. It is about the heart of our democracy. This is the people's house, and the people send their representatives here to the legislature to represent them. And so I think it's a really great thing that we pay tribute to those who fought and paid the ultimate sacrifice for our tributes, for our freedoms. The same you can see, the flags that adorn the rotunda here are the battalion flags of many battalions, particularly of Albertans who fought, some of which paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. The last two things that I want to show you are two really incredible statues that are here in the rotunda. And they were actually commissioned by Premier Lougheed in 1980 and then installed here in the Rotunda in 1982. The first is a picture of Princess Louise Caroline Alberta. And she is the fourth daughter of Queen Victoria, and she was the wife of the fourth Canadian Governor General. And actually, this province is named after her. When the Governor General had toured to Alberta and saw its splendor and its glory, it reminded him of his wife, Louise Caroline Alberta. And so there was some discussion about what to call the province of Alberta, and North Carolina, South Carolina had already been taken. There was some concern that there would be confusion, and so they arrived on Alberta, and I think we are all glad that they did. Let me take you to one more quick statue here in the chamber that's equally as important. We are located on treaty land here, and so we pay tribute to some of the great Indigenous Albertans here in the Rotunda as well. And of course, here we have Great Chief Crowfoot. He was the chief of the Blackfoot Confederate and was responsible for the signing of Treaty 7. And so it is a very much important part of Alberta's history, and so we pay tribute here in the Rotunda to that history as well. So that is the majority of the tour for today. I'm going to walk out here to the center, or maybe we'll walk over to the stairwell and preview what we're going to see next week, because next week we're going to go up into the chamber, and I want to take you on some of the backstage parts of the Legislature building, in particular right into the chamber and onto the chamber floor. I'm going to show you the members' lounges where only members can be, the South Members Lounge, and I'm going to put in a phone call to my good friend, the Lieutenant Governor, and see if she'll allow us into the Lieutenant Governor's suite, because there's some really, really incredible things inside there that I really hope to be able to share with you. So I'm not sure if there was any questions today, but I'll be happy to take a couple of them.
How many people work at the Legislature?
So the question is, how many people work here at the Legislature? Now, the interesting thing about the Legislature is there are a number of different branches or types of government that work here. So we have the Premier's wing of government, that's called the Executive Council, and all of the ministers and staff work for the government of Alberta. People that work for the Speaker's office, they all work for the Legislative Assembly office. So inside this building, I don't know exactly how many people work for the government of Alberta, but here in the legislative precinct, there's about 300 people, 350 people who work for the Legislative Assembly office of Alberta, and I would guess in this building probably somewhere close to 200 other individuals, but again, that would just be a guess of folks who work specifically for the government of Alberta. Of course, we have a number of different folks who work here, including security guards, the Legislative Assembly, security service, and of course we've got a bunch of really great tour guides who do this on a much better and more professional way.
Do we know what the square footage of the building is?
You know, that's a great question. What is the square footage of the actual building? And I looked for that. I'll send an email to the library to find that out, but I do know that, as I mentioned earlier, that the space on the ground that it takes up is 178 feet in the north and south direction, and 427 feet in the east and west direction.
What is the newest thing in the building?
Oh, you know, there are lots of new things that are always being brought into the, not always being brought, but often we find ways to commemorate different activities. And the previous speaker, his name was Speaker Bob Warner, he actually had installed 2 pieces of original Indigenous art They represent a sunrise and a sunset. Here, they're actually in the chamber, so next week I'll point those out to folks. And they are to provide a reminder that the sun will always rise and never entirely set on the province of Alberta. I think it's a great. The other thing that is in the chamber that's fairly recent is the piece of stained glass that is a donation from the city of Edmonton, and it pays tribute to our pioneers here in the province of Alberta.
Can we see the hamburger?
Oh, that is a great question. So for those of you who might not know, is that inside the library, someone 50 years ago tabled a hamburger in the legislature, and because it became an official record of the legislature and it is stored for all eternity, if you will, in the library, and I would be more than happy to show you that on a later tour. I'll take you downstairs to the library and be happy to get the hamburger out so you can have a really close look at it. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been my absolute pleasure to have you here on Facebook Live. If you have any ideas or things that you might like to see, please feel free to reach out to my office. You can email us directly, provide some suggestions, ideas of other things that you might like to see in the legislature. Next week, we're going to be inside the chamber, which is just beyond those doors, and hopefully we'll be able to check out the Lieutenant Governor's suite as well. And then the following week, I'm going to take you way up to the Palm Room and hopefully up to the Bell Tower as well. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you guys have a great day. Stay safe, get outside, but make sure you do it in a responsible manner.